and how the progress on these issues, what you might look for later on tonight. Just mention this: we're not covering the presidential election. All of us will be up late and then into the next week. So my name is Steve Thomasy. As a longtime history teacher and politics junkie, I'm happy to be here tonight, and I am very happy to share this table with two of my longtime friends, and I'm glad to have them. On my far left is Willie Wilson, who is also a longtime history teacher and a longtime Brockton resident and analyst of Brockton events. And then Willie and I, about a week ago, were talking about a third person and thought that rather than have another old guy, we would bring in some diversity. So we have happily here another friend of ours, Courtney Henderson, who in her academic life studied politics and public policy, currently is employed by the city of Brockton in City Hall as a director of immigration services. So we're ready to go tonight and begin our discussion of the issues. Before I sort of lead off on what it was we voted for, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to say something to the audience tonight. Do you feel excitement about any of these races other than like the presidency? Has that have been a great enough distraction, or do you have any really personal feelings about what the people of Brockton could have voted for today?
I'm excited to see how the ballot questions are going to flesh out. And particularly the five that are there, and particularly MCAS and the one concerning minimum wage for wait staff.
I'm gonna have to say the same. That's the one that's keeping me up at night. Are those two questions on the ballot?
Okay, so what we're looking at tonight is specifically, and we have sample ballots here. A thing that you might have noticed today. And I noticed it when I voted on Halloween up at the mall, was the first thing you could have voted for was electors for president. And I thought that was interesting. I don't remember the word electors being there in the past. But anyway, people are aware that we're actually voting for electors and not directly for the president. But locally in Massachusetts, we have a Senate race, and Elizabeth Warren is running against John Deaton. It's unlikely that she'll lose that race. She, just as a personal note, she is my favorite politician in Massachusetts. She seems not to back down, and that up from the fight, and that seems to be her watchword. There was a race for state representative, which is interesting. I went in on Thursday unaware that Stephen Lynch, our longtime state rep here, unaware that he had an opponent. And then I saw that this person is Robert Burke, and on the ballot it says that he's from Dedham. I never heard of him. Some of you may not have been aware that there was even a race. I have not seen any advertising whatsoever. I've seen no signs for Stephen Lynch, so it's my guess he's going to win really big. It's nice at least that he has some opponents. So that's our representative in Congress. The next thing on the ballot is this race for Governor's Council 2nd District. Now, these are really strangely shaped districts. If you're familiar with the term gerrymandering, they meander all over the place. So in our district, there it is there. We are not the green, the red in that, right? Number 2?
The pink, yeah.
The pink, sorry. It goes way out to Hopkinton and down to, I really can't read that, but down far, and it's all over the place. And so this is a Governor's Council 2nd District. This is usually an ignored race. But this year, in our district and one other district, I think it's 4, the one in Boston, there has been a change in the type of candidates that we're seeing. Would you like to talk about that in this case?
Absolutely. Well, this is another historical election for this particular seat. If Tamisha wins, she would be the first Black woman to serve on the governor's council, and she happens to be a part of the same sorority as Kamala Harris. So, so we might see a wave of pink and green fairly soon if she advances and wins this election. It's so strong to see. It's such a brilliant moment to see her, because I used to be on her campaign when she was running for state rep in Stoughton, and to see her blossom into this new candidate for governor's council. I definitely see her coming out strong. She's not shy anymore. She definitely knocks on doors, which she wasn't doing previously before. So I think she's a strong candidate. She's definitely has grown as a candidate and as a public speaker.
Could we talk about exactly what members do?
Right. It usually doesn't come up. Okay, they have 2 functions, the members of the governor's council. One is to pass on judges. So if the governor nominates a person to be a state court judge, they are the ones that accept or reject it, right? I don't remember any examples of them rejecting any of the judges, but that's one of their powers. The second one, which is more notable, at least in terms of news stories, is that they get to approve or not approve of parole requests. Mm-hmm. So letting people out after a certain amount of time in prison. Occasionally you get something that's controversial there. But largely this is a very quiet organization.
There was some controversy the last time, and when Governor Healy had recommended somebody to the Supreme Judicial Court, and I thought it was really unfair, because actually the person was nominated by former Governor Deval Patrick during his administration, but they tried to twist it. Her name went forward, and because Governor Healy had some former romantic relationship with that.
She had been a longtime partner. This is Gabrielle Wolahogian, and that woman had been Governor Healy's longtime partner, not currently. Right, and so there was some question about whether that was like the equivalent of nepotism. And it was funny, I'd never heard of that woman. I mean, because I'm a trivia junkie, I can name the 7 people on the Supreme Judicial Court, but they're usually kind of obscure,
right?
And that woman got some notoriety because of that, right? The other person who's notable on the Supreme Judicial Court is Kimberly Budd, who was the first Black woman and the first Black person, to be Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. There are 7 people on that, 5 of whom were selected by Charlie Baker, and the last 2 women are Maura Healey. But why this is important here is that both in this district and in Boston, there's another Black woman of Haitian descent who is running for this position in the area that Boston is in the district that Boston is in. Neither one of them are lawyers. Almost always these people are lawyers. And neither one of these people are lawyers. They bring in different kinds of experience to this, not only because they would be the only people of color on this ever, I think, on this board, but also because their own experience, like Tamisha Seville is, I'm sorry, what is it? She's an officer in probation, right? So she has a different relationship with people who are seeking parole, for example, than the other ones. So we'll have to see how that comes out. After that, the next thing is Senator in General Court. That's That's Mike Brady. Sadly, you'll see he has no opponent. Yeah, I mean, I have statistics which I'll talk about later, but very few of the incumbents in the state of Massachusetts, in the state legislature, have opponents, a really tiny amount. I can give you those numbers later. Where there are races is like in the state rep race, and this is because Jerry Cassidy, the long time, I think 5 terms, 10 years state rep, has decided not to run again. So this is an open seat, and so there is, by necessity, a competitive election. It's kind of the favorite, I would say. This is from my own observations. Is Bridget Plouffe. She is Jerry Cassidy's chief of staff. She really knows where everything is in the State House, having worked there for so long, and she runs all of his research and is really influential in his decision making. So she's likely to merge, I think, tonight. But it's an interesting district in that after the last U.S. Census, all of the districts of Massachusetts were redistricted. Their configurations of the district were changed. So Jerry Cassidy originally had what was called a majority-minority district after the 2010 census. So his district was entirely in Brockton, right up the middle. But now, after this redistricting, there are only 2 wards from Brockton in this newly created district, the 9th Plymouth, and there's people in a lot of people in West Bridgewater, East Bridgewater, and Easton. So the configuration has changed. You're not running in the same district that Jerry Cassidy had been doing. I don't know if you have any observations on the people that are opposing her, but they're not really well known. So I suspect she'll win.
The same.
Right. Now, we did see there, we have 2 other state reps from Brockton, Michelle Dubois, unopposed, hasn't been opposed for a while, and Rita Mendez, who was opposed in the primary,
Yes.
but she does not have a general election opponent, right, which is really widespread across the state. County commissioner, another sort of obscure position, right? If you ask people, what do the county commissioners do? If you've ever lived in another state, the county government is often very important. My grandsons go to Fayette County Public Schools in Kentucky, right? Even though they live in the big city of Lexington. Here, county commissioners mainly have the opportunity to distribute federal funds out to cities and towns that we get just as part of the federal process. There are 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. So I think, yes, that's all of the things that all the candidates that we could have voted for. So there are the 5 ballot questions that I think are the hottest. They've been the most emotionally fraught ones. People have really strong feelings about these things, pro or con.
And we're going to talk about those after we return from break.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I didn't realize I was breaking. No, we're breaking.
I know it's sometimes hard to reach out to someone or to seek help, but it's amazing whenever your friends are there for you and can kind of be that support system. Do you ever like check in on your friends or vice versa?
I try to. I have one friend back home, and he reached out to me, and he was like, I was like thinking about like killing myself, and I was like, whoa, sorry.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
You never know what someone's going through.
Yeah. It's like a relief off of my shoulders too.
Yeah.
Because he actually did reach out when he didn't have to, you know? Yeah, I feel like it's very important if someone does feel that way to know that there is help out there.
What keeps you hopeful? What brings you hope?
So I feel like having like goals, they don't have to be big goals, just like a bunch of little goals, just have something to always look forward to day to day. Try to appreciate the small things, like calling the people around you, just shouting it up and just appreciating the things that you have right now.
For more resources on how to check in on a friend, go to seizetheawkward.org.
Hate is loud. It gets clicks. It gets attention. Hate, however, is actually quite small. But love is the majority. Filling up something far more important than any feed. Love fills our hearts, our lives, our every day with understanding, empathy, and compassion. Leaving hate to become what it truly is, a whisper.
Everyone has a ritual, that small thing to keep us focused.
A habit we never skip, to clear our minds and elevate our performance.
But what do you do to keep your head in the game? To drown out the self-doubt and support your mental health. Because being your best isn't just about taking care of your body.
It's about taking care of your mental health. Discover the resources that you need to keep your mind focused and your mental health a priority.
Hi, and we're back. So, our next discussion is going to be about the 5 ballot questions, right? So the 5 ballot questions are simple binary choices, yes or no, right? You agree with the statement or you disagree with it. I love ballot questions. They're the most democratic form of voting that we have in the state or any state in the United States that has ballot questions. Not all do. So in this case, we're given, things that we, the people, decide on directly, not indirectly through our legislators, but directly through our vote. So we can take a look at these things. I do want to say, here we have them there. So we have question 1. Right? Do you approve of a law that that allows the state attorney general to audit, right? Given the authority to audit the legislature, right? So if you vote yes, the state auditor, this is a woman named Diane DeZoglio, has the authority to audit the legislature, and a no vote would make no change in the law today. So do you have a comment on this? Your view on this thing, whether you think it should pass, not necessarily, but what the argument would be for letting it pass.
Well, I personally feel a yes vote is in order. And I feel that even though state officials have been rather quiet on it, I think it's going to pass. And other states have an auditor that actually audits the legislature, and I think that's the way to go.
I think it's a straightforward yes. I can't see how it couldn't pass. And I think it's what we call checks and balances, which I'm sure you all are very familiar with, being the political junkies that you are. But I think it creates a level of responsibility and accountability where we can now look into and audit these budgets.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the opponents of passing this, that is the state legislature and their supporters, have not issued any kind of rebuttals. There are no campaign against this, right? You see a lot of advertisement put out by Diane DeZoglio and the people supporting this for voting yes on this, but no advertising on the other side. And the reason is that they are immediately, once it passes, they're going to have a lawsuit before the state Supreme Court asking for this to be overturned on the basis of separation of powers. And when I hear this, the idea of separation of powers, the Enlightenment idea, from Montesquieu, that we have separation of powers, but always with it, when you were in school, they'd also say what you said, checks and balances. Those things go together. I don't see the
other side. Can you explain on how they're saying it's overstepping?
Yes, they're saying that this is an intrusion by the executive branch into the activities of the legislative branch, and that's a violation of the separation of powers. I think, personally, this is a really weak argument because the auditor is not trying to change the way the state legislature makes rules.
Right.
What she's trying to do is literally pull the veil back from the secrecy that they're famous for engaging in. All public policy forums rate us to be the most secretive of all the state legislators and that sort of thing. And the word audit, you think about the word audit, it means from like auditory, hearing. Right? Do we hear what they're doing, or do they do it in secret? For example, now, you cannot find out how your own state representative voted on any issue whatsoever. All decisions are made in closed-door committee meetings. And then when they have, they're very famous for doing like 20 bills in the last 2 hours of the session, going to midnight or something like that, and they take voice votes. So that it's like all in favor say yes, all in favor, against say no. They don't even record how your state representatives, right? And so you never get to hear what is actually taking place.
So they don't do a roll call.
No roll call.
No roll call.
No. They do it voice vote by acclamation.
And this would change. This would change with.
You would be able to by law now, right? They would be required to say how they voted on everything. They'd have to publicly state what they're actually doing today. You have no idea what they're doing up there. Our state legislature, and the people that we have here in Brockton, we like them and they're nice and they bring home the bacon maybe for our city. But our state legislature, only a few people, 20 maybe out of the 200, actually are decision makers. Everybody else essentially functions as backbenchers. Occasionally people get elected sort of on a progressive ticket. I'm going up there to make things better and to change things, but they're quickly given very few choices. If you cooperate with us, we'll let you bring home some bacon to your district. If you don't, you not only don't get promoted through the ranks to higher paying positions, but you also don't get to bring back the stuff. So they're quickly brought to heel, right? There are no term limits. There's no term limits on the leadership. There was for a while when George Kaverian was in there, but that was only a brief period. And the state legislature makes all the rules for themselves, right? So the lawyers for DeZoglio, when they have this case, are going to argue checks and balances. And the lawyers for the legislature are going to, and we're going to see.
And it'll be litigated. Let's go to question number 2, which is quite controversial.
Oh, yeah.
This is the law proposed by initiative petition. Do you approve of a law? And I'm looking at this print. Oh, there it is. Excellent. I'll read the summary. As required by law, summaries are written by the state attorney general. This proposed law would eliminate the requirement that a student pass the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System, MCAS test, or other statewide or district-wide assessments in mathematics, science, technology, and English in order to receive a high school diploma. Instead, in order for a student to receive a high school diploma, the proposed law would require the student to complete coursework certified by the student's district as demonstrating mastery of the competencies contained in the state academic standards in mathematics, science, technology, and English, as well as any additional areas determined by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. So now, a yes vote would eliminate the requirement for students to pass the MCAS in order to receive their diploma, but the MCAS still would be administered. A no vote would make no change in the law relative to the requirement that a student pass the MCAS in order to graduate high school. Now, a lot of my colleagues, having been a principal and department head, the MCAS, for all its faults, does need some modification. But I voted no. And the reason why I voted no is because I feel that there should be changes, and there's some other educators that voted no as well. Now, a lot of teachers would complain when we have MCAS, everything shuts down. It's very difficult. The test, I was part of the pilot of the 1990s that actually, did the first test, and we tested it. And I still think it's one of the reasons why our schools are successful as they are. So I actually say no, because in terms of something to replace it, it's not there yet. And I honestly think one of the reasons why the MTA and the teachers union spent over $10 million is because they want to craft something a little different and maybe modify, and that hasn't done. And I think this is a bargaining chip.
I'm conflicted. It was a hard one for me. I see both sides. I see that there could be improvement in the classroom. What are the causes for students not passing the MCAS? Looking at the curriculum and looking at how the teachers are meeting the students where they are. But then I also see that standardized testing is great to see where the students fall in line of success and where there's areas for improvement. So this one was a really hard one for me, and I actually saw a split on Facebook of I follow a lot of educators and a lot of professors, and it was evenly split that I thought amongst my peers.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, the latest poll that I saw is that the yes to get rid of it will had about 2-to-1 ratio, right? The MCAS came into existence because there's a federal law requiring a standardized test in order to get federal funds. The MCAS, it's 7% or something of the students don't pass. So it's not really like a major hurdle for people.
I just have to interrupt you. When you say 7%, now what happens is if that 7%,
right?
When those
there are things that they can do after that,
right?
Yeah.
And so what if you look at it? It's actually less than 2% in terms of if they have done everything else.
No, it's a tiny amount. So that I don't think is the real issue. The real issue, at least from my point of view, is that this absolves the state educational apparatus and the state bureaucracies from addressing actual problems. You'll hear them say that we are so good because we have MCAS, which is not the cause. You know, there might be correlation, but it certainly isn't the cause because they have this MCAS, right? You know, there wasn't a graduation requirement till 2003, and Massachusetts was still in the lead right there. MCAS would continue to exist in order to get the federal funding. MCAS is good and should be given to everybody to measure progress of the kids from 3rd grade to 10th grade, right? See their progress. Also, you can measure laterally this district against that district and that. None of that goes away here. But it would require the state educational apparatus to enact reforms, right? For example, Mass Core, right? They won't put in Mass Core because they say some districts can't afford it. Well, maybe you could give them some more money. There's no core curriculum across the state. We don't need it because there's MCAS. Right. Scores have been going down since COVID, but we don't have to address those specific problems because we have MCAS, and everybody can say we have MCAS. Well, and I'm just saying it's used as an excuse for not making actual vital reforms.
Well, I think that's why I think the MTA has spent over $10 million, to actually change it. Now, the other thing that I do fault with the system is it's a 10th grade test. So one of the criticisms is it doesn't do enough in terms of challenging students 11th, 12th grade and beyond, post high school, and so that is missing because it's basically a 10th grade test. Right. And so there are a lot of things that can be done to strengthen it and also to include these other things. Right. But I think
if you get the lowest possible passing score in 10th grade, then you are free. Right. You will graduate from high school, right? Right. Your own town, it can have very weak requirements. There's no core curriculum requirements for all the states. So if you get the lowest possible passing grade, the minimum competency grade, then you're free, right? In 10th grade.
Right, right.
They don't see this as a flaw. This means they would have to do more work, the state apparatus, if this thing fails. Right. And I think it's a call for reform.
Right.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this one will play out. We do have another one which is quite similar to the tips, but this is not quite about the tips. So it's question 3. So the summary here is the proposed law would provide transportation network drivers with the right to form unions to collectively bargain with transportation network companies, which are companies that use digital network to connect riders to drivers for prearranged transportation, to create negotiated recommendations concerning wages, benefits, and terms and conditions of work. Drivers would not be required to engage in any union activities. Companies would be allowed to form multi-company associations to represent them when negotiating with driver organizations. The state would supervise the labor activities permitted by the proposed law and would have responsibility for approving or disapproving the negotiated recommendations. The proposed law would define certain activities by a company or a driver organization to be unfair work practices. The proposed law would establish a hearing process for the State Employment Relations Board to follow when a company or driver organization is charged with an unfair work practice. The proposed law would permit the board to take action, including awarding compensation to adversely affected drivers if it is found that an unfair work practice has been committed. The proposed law would provide for an appeal of a board decision to the State Appeals Court. So if this were to vote in favor, it would provide transportation network drivers the option to form unions to collectively bargain with transportation network companies regarding wages, benefits, and terms and conditions of work. And then if it passes, if it votes no or votes down, there will be no changes to the law relative to this.
So where do you stand on the issue?
It's the same as question 5 to me. I don't know. You know, I think they do have the right. Uber and Lyft have benefited from having these drivers, and we see that they have created a big market in the economy. So I think they do have the right to form a union. I'm a union girl.
Yeah, me too. And it gives them the option. Now, I think there will be some companies that will say no.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, but it gives them.
No. The option is for individual drivers to join or not join.
Right.
Right. If this passes, the Uber and Lyft would not have. I see this not only a question of union or not, but when you look at number 5, it's the powerful against people who they control. I mean, Uber or Lyft drivers. Let me just talk about the power of it. You and your friends are going to a concert. How are you going to get there? You're going to Uber there. What you have is a noun that has become a verb. When that takes place, you can see how it's dominated the consciousness of the thing. So that shows that they have a lot of power. The individual drivers have virtually no power. They can be cut off. For example, if you give them a bad rating because, I don't know, somebody left something here and you were offended by it, and the company sees this, they can cut off. They control the communication thing, right? Like, to go get somebody, that's totally controlled by the big companies. And these people are essentially serfs.
Yeah.
Now, your vision and the way it's, like you'll see, they were running ads, Uber and Lyft in the beginning. They seem to have come back because they were sort of distasteful, but they showed drivers who were saying how lovely it was that they're independent contractors and they can work whenever they want. So the vision is something like the guy goes to work and he works an 11 to 8 shift, and instead of going to bed right away when he gets home, his family needs a little more money, and he goes and goes to the airport and drives people for the next 6 hours, come home, sleeps a little bit, and then goes back to his first job, then he does his second job, and he's making more money, and he's controlling his own destiny. That's the way it's shown. But in reality, that's not who has this. This is people who are desperate to make some money.
Yeah. So I think we have some results coming in.
Oh,
which is exciting. So as you called it, Steve, Bridget overwhelmingly slipped that one up.
Yeah, I mean, if you put the votes of the two opponents together, they are just about half of the numbers that she had. And she has it's funny, Novak here, who, if you talk to Democrats, they immediately bring up the fact that he had spent time in prison for various financial improprieties. And Jonathan Gill, who has a lot of signs up in Easton, the town that he lives in, 214 votes, that's a tiny amount.
Right.
And this kind of thing. Plus, with a three-way race, she doesn't technically have to get a majority, only a plurality. So, and if you drive around, at least in Brockton and Easton, her signs are just like everywhere.
Now, could you explain to our audience the difference between the plurality and?
Oh yeah, the most votes is a plurality, right? So if there's 3 candidates and there's 10 or 9 votes out there, if you get 4 votes, you can win if the other get 3 and 2, right? So you don't have to have 5 out of 9.
Right.
You only right. So it's just like having the most votes, right? Abraham Lincoln had 40% of the votes, of the popular votes in the 1860 election. He was running against 3 different candidates, right? So he only had a plurality, nothing close to a majority in that 1860 election. That's a
good
an example, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. Question 4. Here we go. Oh, this is the psychedelic drug thing. And it's a funny thing. Willie and I did a program at the library a few weeks ago, and at that time, I was saying that I could go either way on this. I didn't really know how I was going to go for voting for the thing. And it was an example of like, should your own experience be the only guide to making decisions on public matters, right? And so I was recounting a story that in the 60s, back in the day, I would use various things, but I always stayed away from psychedelics because didn't know where I was going to go. And I thought, so that's dangerous. But, if you read about this, I don't think it's any more dangerous than the stuff that they advertise on television every night, right? I mean, this isn't more dangerous than that. And all the drug ads, somebody has a problem here, then they take this, and at the end, everything's wonderful. And then they read the disclaimers, 6 to 8 ways that this could hurt you, and then sometimes kill you. And so I'm thinking this isn't worse than that. Those drugs that you don't even know what they are. Ask your doctor, see if he'll prescribe it. Anyway, do you have a feeling on the psychedelics here? Now, they're saying that it is to be used for people in deep depressions. They cite all these veteran suicides, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they say that this will be used in places where people's mental health improvement seems to be intractable. And this is sort of like the last step, like we'll try to take them through it. And they talk about
the 2 states that actually have.
Yeah, and they talk about how there's counselors who will serve as your guide. I was making the joke about, like in the Doors movie, Jim Morrison goes out the desert with a Native American shaman and they do that sort of thing, that you're going to have a guide through it. The opponents are saying this is basically going to be unregulated. You could grow this stuff yourself, and there could be people driving and all that. It almost seems like a thing that, like the layman like us, we all went to school, we got some idea about MCAS, what that means. What do I know about this? My expertise.
I don't know much about this one, to be honest.
Yeah, I voted yes for it because I'm a big fan of ballot initiatives.
Well, I voted yes for it too, but because of
So what was your argument for that?
Well, the 2 states, Oregon and another state where it's Colorado, they've had success. They've monitored, but the other thing is that here in Massachusetts, in Oregon and Colorado, it seems the mostly wealthy people because it's very expensive. And the idea here in Massachusetts in terms of getting on, so that there's an issue of equity in terms of what's, when it's, if it passes and becomes available, that that there'll be something in the mechanism to see that people of lower means can also have access to it.
Oh, yeah.
But the other thing is, in terms of some of the former vets, it does work for them, and so
I didn't know that.
yeah.
And it's funny because there is, if you like, you were looking in your red book, there is one part for each of these questions where it talks about the economic consequences for the state, and the only one of the 5 that has that described economic consequences in the state is this one here. There'd be a 15% tax on stuff that's grown legally.
Right.
And it would be devoted to creating a commission to some degree like the Cannabis Control Commission, and also individual cities and towns, if they had a legally open dispensary, could also charge the tax, like the cannabis here, and so it's sold as having positive economic consequences. Also, that's been another little push. Who knows? I don't know personally, for example, to what degree has Brockton as a city profited from marijuana? I don't know the answer to that.
And that's a good question.
That is a great question.
Question 5. This is probably the hardest one. The tipping of the waitresses. Would you like to begin on this? No, I know, 'cause since you have been a waitress.
Yes.
I never have.
Neither have I.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the summary, really briefly, is it's as required. Here we go. As required by law, the statements described. Okay. Yep. Gotcha. So really, this has been presented by servers in the state. Asking for an increase in minimum wage. Well, asking for their employers to match so that they're receiving the state minimum wage, and removing the tips. So this one's actually a pretty good one as well. I have to say this might be one of my favorite ballot questions here. I'm also split. As someone that used to serve many years ago in undergrad, I had the luxury of not reporting my tips. I don't know if I should say that out loud. But I don't know. I see both sides of the argument. I do see why. I personally believe that restaurants should cover their wage, and it should not be up to the patrons to make sure that their servers are getting paid by what they deserve. I feel like that's just part of business. It's the cost of business, is making sure that you are taking care of your employers.
I don't know if they can put that back up on the screen. What we were looking at, the
how it's phased in over 5 years.
If they could put that back on the screen. You see down there on the yes vote, right? There's one word in this that really bothered me. So it says, at which point, starting in January of 2029, when it goes to $15 minimum wage, at which point employers could pool all tips and distribute them to all non-management workers. Now, could pool. Why doesn't it say would be required to pool? It says could pool, right? And non-management workers, that's pretty vague who that is. Now, that would apply to all of the back of the house people, the people that do the dishes, also the busboy, and all this sort of thing. But could pool. What I have heard from just sort of like my wife and I, when we go to restaurants, asking the waitress, I said, we just want to hear what you say. And they all say, we've been told by the management that we should oppose this. The waitresses say that to us at the table, and it's like we've been told by the management. The word "could" implies that it'll be up to the employer to choose whether to. So, my understanding, at least talking not a lot of waitresses, 3, is that their employers are telling them, "Oh, you're going to have to give your tips away to the busboys and stuff like that." It says "could." I mean, isn't that pretty vague?
It is vague.
For a law, it'll become a law. Isn't that the word "could"? So that bothered me. I did vote for this.
Right.
Because if it's powerful against powerless, and it's like I don't have much of a choice on that.
Right.
I kind of like that it's vague, though, because you don't want too much overstepping of the government in a business. So I'm looking at it in that perspective. And it could be that someone, like you mentioned, the bussers, or those that are doing the dishes, they might have a slower time or like a slower day in the back, but in the front they might not be as slow. I mean, or they might have more fast pace.
Right.
So I'm saying, like, is that fair to split it evenly when the workload is not even?
No, I understand. My complaint is about the grammar
With
of
the
it.
grammar of it.
Because if this passes, it becomes a law. But the word could, being, you can go either way with it, opens everything immediately to all sorts of litigation, right? It's not really clear what you have voted for. Could doesn't seem to be the law.
But that's the other thing with ballot initiatives. A lot of times, then they're cleaned up. Some of the, as they work out the details,
Oh no, the state legislature will clean these up quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
And they have subverted some. Do you remember when we passed the law that would reduced the state income tax to 5%, right? Mm-hmm. Now, it was 5 point something 6 or something like that. It took the state legislature, they did it in incrementally over, and their argument was that they, would have to account for this lack of revenue each year, and that's what you do. So the fact is that people vote for things without really understanding that these will be moved around either by litigation or the state legislature, which has to implement these laws.
Right.
Right? It's like when you read a constitutional amendment, the last clause of any constitutional amendment is that Congress will have the right to pass legislation to implement this, this constitutional amendment that just passed. And that's, so it's not all that clear. But I think these are a lot of fun. I mean, if you look back,
Yeah.
how you keep on reading the thing about as required by law, this summary has to be written, that was passed in a ballot initiative in 1978.
That's why we have the red booklets, the
Right.
pamphlets.
The Red Book was required by a ballot initiative.
I like that.
In a ballot question in 1978, because people were saying, we don't know what we're really voting for. Right.
I think I want to go back to the question 5 and the history behind tipping. I think that's where I have my issues. Is tipping came around post-slavery because employers didn't want to pay ex-slaves a full salary, and it required but it encouraged those being serviced to pay tips to former slaves. And for me, I think we've lost the history behind tipping, where we're looking at it more so as an issue of whether we want to remove tipping and enforce full, salary being paid by the employer, but not looking at why tipping even became a thing in the United States. You're a historian, so I know both of you are historians. So I'm curious to hear, what are your thoughts, knowing that tipping began post-slavery?
Well, I was earlier we had a discussion, and how in Europe now they don't tip.
No, it's considered rude.
It's considered an insult,
Yes.
but they light up when Americans come to visit.
Right, because they know that Americans don't know that they don't have to tip. No, that's true.
No, it is true. It is true.
So and you've recently been. So the thing of it is, you're absolutely right, and that the origins, and how, and I'm also thinking about, after slavery, and again in the South, and we see the remnants of that with most Southern states that have a real low minimum wage, and,
Right.
and this is another thing in terms of
$7.50,
the differences between red and blue states.
In New Hampshire, we were just up there and we're talking to people who live there. It's still $7.50 in New Hampshire. The cost of living isn't that much different than here.
No.
$7.50, it's half of what ours here. But the thing about when you're talking about the slavery, I'm always uncomfortable, like in restaurants, if it's like a nice restaurant where, the waitress is really trying to, and you don't know who's being authentic, and you're trying to be nice to them, and there's this kind of thing, and the whole thing feels so, like, if you analyze it, kind of, and, like, I've thought about, could I ever be a waiter? Well, no, I mean, I just, like.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, no, it's not just that. It's like, you have to be an actor.
It is acting.
It's acting there. There's very little authenticity there, and even when it appears to be authentic, and I always think, am I being manipulated by this waitress?
Yeah.
And I don't really care, because I feel I know what the game is, but a lot of the people who actually depend on like feeding their children with their tips, it just feels demeaning.
It is
It is demeaning. And see, this is what people don't realize too. This actual question was brought forward by wait staff,
Right.
people, and so it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a yes vote, and I think people are going to be surprised. Now, the big restaurants won't be impacted, but it's the neighborhood restaurants.
Right.
They're the ones they feel they're going to be impacted the most. And I have a few friends who own restaurants, and they were concerned. And I said, well, it's phased in, so it doesn't take effect. Yeah. It's phased in, and but the restaurant owners are against it. But if you talk to the waitstaff, most of them are for it.
Yeah. Although not publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Oh, we're going to take a break, and we shall return.
So, do you...
I know it's sometimes hard to reach out to someone or to seek help, but it's amazing whenever your friends are there for you and can kind of be that support system. Do you ever like check in on your friends or vice versa?
I try to. I have one friend back home, and he reached out to me, and he was like, I was like thinking about like killing myself, and I was like, whoa, sorry.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
You never know what someone's going through.
Yeah. It's like a relief off of my shoulders too.
Yeah.
Because he actually did reach out when he didn't have to, Yeah, I feel like it's very important if someone does feel that way to know that there is help out there.
What keeps you hopeful? What brings you hope?
So I feel like having like goals, they don't have to be big goals, just like a bunch of little goals, just have something to always look forward to in a day. Try to appreciate the small things, like calling the people around you, just shouting it up, and just appreciating the things that you have right now.
For more resources on how to check in on a friend, go to seizetheawkward.org.
Hate is loud. It gets clicks. It gets attention. Hate, however, is actually quite small. But love is the majority, filling up something far more important than any feed. Love fills our hearts, our lives, our every day with understanding, empathy, and compassion, leaving hate to become what it truly is, a whisper.
Everyone has a ritual, that small thing to keep us focused.
A habit we never skip, to clear our minds and elevate our performance.
But what do you do to keep your head in the game? To drown out the self-doubt and support your mental health. Because being your best isn't just about taking care of your body.
It's about taking care of your mental health. Discover the resources that you need to keep your mind focused and your mental health a priority.
All right, and welcome back. So we have some results to share with you. This is less than 10%, so we do want to note that this is not the final count, but we have the result, less than 10% of the results from AP as our source for the ballot questions. So far we have 71.9% in the yes in favor of ballot question number 1.
The auditing of the legislature.
Correct. And then question 2 in regards to MCAS is so far at 59.7% in favor. And then ballot number 3 was the psychedelics, I believe.
No, the taxi driver, the Uber drivers.
Yes, okay.
Rideshare.
At 57.9% in favor. And then question number 4, which was the psychedelics, is at 54.6% against. And then the last ballot question, which in regards to tips, is 61.3% against.
against raising it.
It gets
Yeah.
raising the,
To
yes.
$15
And again,
by January of 2029, yeah.
right, 10%, less than 200,000.
Right.
Right. They're, yeah, and so that seems like it's going to be a long night ahead for the counts on this. And these are statewide, these are not
Right.
Right.
Brockton-wise. So it's going to take a while for that to come in because, it's 9:37 now.
Yeah,
And
so-
and they started announcing at 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a slow count.
One of the questions that I wanted to put forward to the group.
Actually, before you go to that, we do have an update on our state rep 9th Plymouth District race. Bridget Plouffe is still in the lead, but we do see Lawrence Novak actually gaining up. He's still pretty far behind, but he did gain some votes over the short break that we had.
Do we know what percentage this is?
It does not show, but
Okay.
Bridget is still in the lead.
Right,
And-
and if you add both of theirs together, she's winning by more than 2-1.
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so that's not a,
Now our, it was Tip O'Neill that had won, who was a fellow BC grad, that all politics are local. He had said that, but what I'm thinking about the city of Brockton, my question to you two is, what can we look forward to the future for our city, particularly for the city? What kinds of changes would help the city of Brockton become more inviting, more engaging, more business-minded, just a city that citizens can be proud of? We're all Brocktonians here.
yeah, I mean, since it's a politics show, we're going to have a huge turnout in Brockton for this thing because there's so much advertising. I'm sure we're going to be over 70% because of the presidential election. The last mayor's election, where you actually know people and can talk to them, and you can go to City Hall and talk to people like the mayor, 18%, right? So I think as I've observed this, living here since '85, his turnout is always low. And you're not going to get change if you just keep things the same. I mean, it just makes sense to do it, and I remember.
Well, what can we do to get
Well,
change?
I think that I don't know, there had to be better candidates, more candidates. I don't know what exactly it is.
I think it's the lack of trust. I think we've seen now in the city that there has been things that have been kept from the community for a long time, and it's now ballooning, and the balloon has popped now, and everything that was in the balloon is being scattered.
So you're
across the
talking about
city.
disclosure issues.
Absolutely. When I answer this question, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I think there are various reasons why people don't vote, and it could be that they don't like any of the candidates, and so they find that, or a lot of times people are running unopposed, so they don't feel like they want to vote. But we do have. So these are our final results. We have Lawrence Peter Novak with 1,709 votes. We have Jonathan Wilshire Gill with 374, so he did gain a couple of votes over the short break. And then Bridget Plouffe still in the lead as the elected official with 5,137 votes.
And these are just the unofficial.
The unofficial Brockton results, but these are confirmed as
Yeah, likely to be. So,
likely to be
yeah,
confirmed.
I mean, I think my wife is currently at her event, which is at Tuta Bene, is that what it's called? Or Pasta
Bene.
Bene? or-
Pasta Bene, yeah.
Yeah, over across from White's. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's good. Not a surprise.
No,
and she seems a bright young woman.
Oh, yeah,
You know, and so I think we did well there.
Her father was one of my students when I taught at Brockton High.
Her father, Tom Plouffe?
Yeah,
Really?
He was one of my students. And then her
Boy,
grandfather.
you must be old. Or her grandfather is the
Yeah.
school, Plouffe
Well,
School.
I may be old, but I'm not as old as you. You're 4 years older than me.
And you guys are both older than me.
But getting back to, when you mentioned, the whole idea is, I really believe Brockton's future is going to be brighter and better. And it's how do we get there? How do we get there? And what you said about the trust, and you're right, the balloon has popped. I'm tired of hearing people say, "Oh, the other foot hasn't dropped." You just want to you don't want to hear the bad news. But how do we push?
Well, I
forward?
think that there's somehow I am disconnected from the people that represent me at City Hall. How often do I talk to them? How often do they reach out? How often and the answer is almost none, have community meetings, right, in the local schools? Do they consult us? Is it really representative government? There should be some sort of requirement that they have listening sessions, as sermons, something like that. Because I go door to door a lot, whatever campaigns are, and people don't even know that there's an election going on. They can't tell you who their city council is.
Right.
They can't tell you who their school committee. They just can't tell you. Yeah. They might be able to tell you the mayor, but that's about it. And they don't even know that there's an election going on. And then you'll have a primary, and you'll go to somebody's house, and the primary's been completed like 4 weeks ago, and you ask them who you're voting for, and they'll name somebody, usually ethnically based, I voted for, that isn't in the election anymore, and it's just kind of like, and the incumbents, this is the problem, the incumbents have no motivation to increase the electorate. If they get the same 1,000 votes, that they got from the same 1,000 people last time, they get reelected. There's no desire to increase the base.
When I was a little boy, I remember some of the older people in the community saying to me, if everybody voted who's eligible to vote, what a wonderful city we would have.
Yes.
And then they would take that to the next level. What a wonderful state, what a wonderful country. And and the older I get, I say, if everybody if they just voted, I'm not even saying if they don't vote for my candidate, but if they just participated, because now we have an issue where we really, really must engage the younger people. And people say democracy is at risk. You need to teach it. That's why we need civics. That's why we have to engage people.
Ooh.
This one's exciting.
Yeah. This one's coming.
Look at you rubbing your hands together.
She's had the lights on.
No, this is, we're waiting for something, in case you're wondering why we're just babbling here. We're waiting for what we think is an interesting result. Here we go. So in the 2nd district, right now, we don't have.
No,
we
yet.
do.
I have the numbers.
Yeah.
Oh, you have the numbers. Okay, thank you.
Yes, so this is still less than 10% of the ballots that have been counted, but so far we have Tamisha Civil with 58.2% of the vote, with Gremmons with 41.8%. So this is pretty close.
Or it's actually, in a final result, that would be a blowout. Right, that's 17
But this
points.
is less than 10%.
But it's
so
only
far.
10%,
Yeah.
and you don't know where those votes
Where
came
they're-
from.
Right,
exactly.
If they're from her strongholds, that's one thing. So we don't know really the.
Right.
But the fact is that she's certainly in good position at this moment
At
in
this
time.
point, yes.
Yeah.
And
And I must say, I have to commend her, just as a worker. I just was so impressed. She just kept going. She came, to Frederick Douglass, the reading of Frederick, she would, then I saw her at some other churches.
Oh,
and then,
yeah.
So she's,
She's out
see,
in
I
the
didn't know
community.
her before, but from this, and I said, oh.
No,
so I
and
got
whoever-
my friends and relatives.
Whoever
to
her
vote for
current mentors are
They're
doing,
doing
a good
great job.
Oh, yeah.
Even
Yeah.
her social media looks a lot different from
Yeah.
when she ran in a different race. So very proud to see that. I hope it continues to grow in her favor.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was Yeah.
I saw you look at your watch.
watch.
You
right,
remind
right.
me of
so
Bush.
Wrapping up. That's right. I remember that event during the debate with Clinton. Right. Well, I just, we're going to be waiting for the presidential thing, and that's, the big, all-consuming issue here. And I was telling my wife a story about in 1948, the first election that was actually with TV results. Harry Truman was the incumbent president, but he had taken over for Roosevelt when he died. And
Well, Steve,
that was the 1st
let's
time.
hold on to that story, just because I want others
yes.
to be able to hear it too.
Yeah. What is that?
No, I want everyone else to hear it after the break.
Oh, we're at a break. No. Oh, okay.
Oh, it's
so
a wrap.
anyway.
Oh, it's a wrap.
Yeah. So Truman is said by all polling to be way behind. You've probably seen the picture where he holds up. When he goes to bed, the Chicago Tribune had put out a thing saying Dewey wins, the governor of New York. And people are saying, well, it's going to take all night. And Truman used to go to bed at 10 o'clock. And he said, nah, I'll go to bed. It's not going to change it whether I'm awake or not. And he wakes up in the morning, he found out that he won, you know.
Yeah.
But everybody else is freaking out, staying up all night, and he goes to bed. And it's one of my favorite Harry Truman stories,
that's so
you know. You know, there's a lot more for everybody to watch tonight. I know people will be up late, and it's going to go on for days, and it's such a fraught election for all of us. But we thank you if you're, those of you that are watching this either now or in future times on the cable TV, and good luck to all of us.
Any parting words?
Either way, we have to hold our elected officials accountable, regardless of the outcome,
Right, exactly.
because they work for us.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of 60 years ago to the day, the governor of Connecticut, first female governor who ran, not taking over their seat from a husband.
Ella Grasso.
Ella Grasso.
Yeah.
60 years ago to the day, November 5th. And tomorrow
1964?
1974.
74. Sorry, thank you.
And
God.
and I'm thinking tomorrow when we wake up, or
I'm
we might
sorry,
have
that's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
50 years ago, Ella Grasso.
Yeah. And tomorrow, we might have our first few.
Ah, yeah. Did you see this Saturday Night Live?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was great, but
Anyway.
We got to wrap it up.
but this has been fun.
Yeah.
Will you come again?
I will definitely come again,
right,
and
yeah.
I'll be up with my glass of wine, waiting for the rest of the 90% of the results to come in.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Good night, all.
Wow. I'm telling you.